Welcome to another edition of the Candid Talk segment. A dark cloud has befallen the nation, not only Zambia but Africa at large. Africa is at a deep loss of a father and a freedom fighter, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. May his soul rest in peace. And on today's segment, we are joined by our very own Sister D, who will share with us what KK meant to her. Welcome to the show, Sister D.
Thank you so much. I'm humbled to be on this program.
As you know that Zambia is at a very deep loss, unfortunately, we received the news of the passing of our first Republican president, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. How did you feel after receiving the news?
Of course, I felt very sad because, in as much as we know that death is inevitable, but immediately you hear that somebody has passed on. It's a pain, and for us, we grew up knowing Kaunda all our lives. He was this God, where he looked like he wasn't human. He was just this God who always be there. And to hear of his passing, I think it was devastating. But of course, I just told myself, I think it's also worth to celebrate his life.
Okay.
Yeah.
You talked of thinking of KK as a god, as a supreme being. Even in the time of UNIP, there was that famous slogan to say KK Wamiaya. So we all thought that KK will forever be there. But unfortunately, the news of his passing was really heartbreaking. What did KK mean to you as an individual?
As in an individual, I think KK, for me, was a patriot. KK loved Zambia, KK loved Africa. KK wanted the best for Zambians. For me, I grew up in a country where, there was a lot of industrialization, tires were made in Zambia, blankets, cars, and it was so amazing that even in the supermarkets, when you went into Moiseni or ZCBC, you will not find a foreign product. It was all Zambian products. So for me, I think he's a person who loved Zambia and made sure that he created jobs for Zambians because everything was made in Zambia, meaning, we had jobs. People had to make the biscuits, people had to make the cooking oil, people had to make the cars, people had to make the blankets. So for me, I think he's a person that really wanted to see Zambia prosper.
How can you define KK in relation to freedom and the struggle for independence?
Like I said in the beginning, he loved Africa. I was around when those bombings were being done, by Ian Smith of Zimbabwe. I remember us running away from the bombings. We didn't even know where to go, because those headquarters for certain political parties in the Southern African region were based in Zambia, like the Namibia and I think Zimbabwe, South Africa, So I think he knew that there was no independence if your neighbor is not independent. And Zambia, as we knew it, it was a landlocked country, and all our neighbors were not independent by that time. Not all of them, but South Africa and the other countries. So I think he saw it that independence for ourselves is not independence until our neighbors are independent. And like he's saying, he always said, love your neighbor as you love yourselves. And he practiced it. So for me, he's a person who believed that you cannot be free, you cannot be independent without your neighbors being independent. And he made sure that the independence was gained. We saw South Africa apartheid, we saw Zimbabwe, we saw Mozambique, and nobody or no history will be written in those countries if you're talking of the liberation without the name of Kaunda. So Kaunda was a patriot, Kaunda was a Pan-Africanist.
It is evident that what KK did, he did not only fight for the independence of Zambia, but for Africa at large. How do you think Africa should remember KK?
I think Africa should remember KK as this super being that was given to us by God. Very few people are principled, very few people cannot be bought, and for him, he stood for the Africans. He went to America and talking to Ronald Reagan, telling him straight into his face what he wanted to see for Africa. But for some leaders, like now, they'll go there, whatever the Western will tell them is what will go. You know, but Kaunda was a principled man. Kaunda was this man who loved Africa and believed that what is good for Africa is good for all of us. So I think we should remember him as a man who believed that Africa was the best thing that happened to this world.
I think you're one of the people who's experienced some part of Kaunda's livelihood. But to the next generation, it will just be a story which will be written down in books. So what do you think the passing of Keke will mean to the coming generation?
I think it's time to include our history in the syllabus. You know, I know we learn about European history, you know, but not so much the Hitlers. Can you imagine? And not so much about our Kaunda, not so much about those, you know, freedom fighters, those people who fought that Africa be independent. We haven't seen much of that, but our children need to know. Yesterday I was on a certain radio station, and the young journalist was asking me to say, it was telling me to say, you know, I'm so surprised that there's so much to talk about Kaunda, you know, but we haven't heard about this until his demise. Can you imagine how unfair that is to our children? Yes. You know, so for me, I insist we keep our stories, and let's tell our own story. Let's tell our children our own stories. So it's important that we tell them how we lived. You know, we can revive things like humanism. You know, there was always a humanism week, in UNIP days. At school, wherever, everybody's cleaning, everybody's taking care of the surroundings and stuff like that. So some of those things are things that we can, you know, copy, and think that I think we can continue with his legacy if we started doing, you know, some of those things. The lawlessness, I think it's time that we, you know, we just looked at ourselves and think of how Kaunda was running this country. You know, there was law and order, you know. I mean, you cannot just throw a paper anywhere. You knew that this is wrong, and definitely they'll bring a dustbin for you to teach you to say that paper you have in your hands must be thrown in a dustbin. That was Kaunda. In school, we went to school and we had pencils. You know, you are in grade 1, immediately you get into class, you find your books and your pencils ready on the desk. It was so amazing. We had the textbooks. So I think we can emulate his leadership. He wasn't a perfect being. I think there were times that people thought, you know, this is not going the right way. But I think he had the heart for the country. He did what he could.
You talked of school and like Kaunda being a contributor to school. And you talked of how we learn about European history, the Hitlers and the Mussolini's, but it's only a few part of Africa and African leaders is covered in our history. Do you think the school curriculum should be revised to teach the coming generation of what our own leaders did for this country, what our own African leaders did for Africa, and like teaching them about? Do you think the school curriculum should be revised?
Definitely. I haven't followed what the children are learning now, but I hope they have actually revised the curriculum. Because for me, I think it's important that we learn our own history, because knowing where you're coming from is knowing where you're going. You know, so I think most of the things that were done, you know, by the Kaundas, the Nyereres, you know, the Jomo Kenyattas, the Selassies, I think it's important that we learn from that, so that their minds were African. You know, if we are going to learn about Europe, we are not Europeans, we are Africans. You know, so that's why sometimes we are bringing different ideologies into our country, because we are not getting the things from our own African leaders, our own African heroes. So I think it's time that we looked into that and made sure that we have our own people to learn from. So history without the Kaundas and them is not history at all.
Okay. What do you think African leaders, the current African leaders, should emulate from Keke?
Patriotism, you know, and self-reliance, you know. Look at now in the COVID days, you know, now when you go into certain shops to look for certain things, you will not find them, you know, because we are not self-reliant. We depend on other countries. Yeah, in as much as it's okay, but I think we need to relook at ourselves and think of making our own things. I think that would be a plus on us, because COVID had really taught us a lesson. You know, it's time we started, you know, thinking big. You know, the capital market also has to be looked at, because it's difficult for someone to get, today I get 100,000, tomorrow I need to refund, you know, to pay back with a 35% or so, you know, so it's very difficult for people to build business. But it's time that we looked at our own local business people and made sure that they, you know, they are supported, you know, economically, you know, so that at least we are able to create our own things, and we are able to find the things that we need within our country.
It's evident that KK also was some kind of involved in music. He loved music, and we all know the song Africa. I don't know if it was him
Tiende
or
Pamosi,
yes, the
yeah,
Tiende Pamosi, and the like. How did KK impact you as an artist?
Well, I think for me, I think being an artist is being a creator. And I've always, you know, looked at artists as people who think, you know, before the others think, because that's creation. God was the greatest artist.
It is kind of, it's on science.
That's it. So for me, I think KK was a great artist. He played guitar. Wherever he went, he made sure that he did a song or played guitar. And for me, I think he knew that art is a voice that can cut across religion. You know, music can cut across race. Music can cut across political parties. So I think KK, for me, as an artist, taught me that actually you cannot retire from art, because even during these days that, you know, he was old, even if you went to see him, you did a song, he'll come there dancing, you know, there was just that, you know, art, that musical being in him. So he also promoted the arts, you know. There were times he would come to watch our plays, you know, as Tikwiza Theatre. You know, you are just on stage and you see this man, you know, coming to watch your play. You know, that was encouragement enough, you know, for young people, having concerts with young musicians, you know. So he was an artist at heart. I think that's why he even worked extra hard for this country, because with art, you know, you're always ahead. You know, people are thinking of now an artist is beyond. You know, if you're going to do a painting, it's something that somebody has never seen. It's creation. You know, when you write a song, when you know, you do a play, it's imagination. So it's something that, you know, is within you, God given. So for me, as an artist, I think he encouraged us, and seeing him continue until his death, I think is amazing, and it's an encouragement to all the artists, because it tells you an artist will always be an artist.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
What is your take about the suggestion from some members of the general public that government should come up with a day to which they should celebrate KK, or maybe a day where 17th of June should be made a holiday?
I'm not for the holiday. Too many holidays, but he should be celebrated every day. Every day. You know, you don't need a day to celebrate Kaunda. You need to celebrate Kaunda all your life. If you're a Zambian, you know, make sure you keep his legacy. You know, if you know Kaunda, you're not going to throw a paper anyhow. If you love Kaunda, you're not going to insult adults. If you love Kaunda, you're going to observe traffic rules. If you love Kaunda, you're going to make sure that Zambia, you know, is industrialized again. That's Kaunda. And you cannot do that in a day. So Kaunda has to be celebrated all our Zambian lives. As long as you live, celebrate Kaunda.
There's this tendency from, I can't say only Zambians, but people are like, they only see something good that someone has done when he's no more. What do you have to say about that tendency?
You know, sometimes we are always talking about this, but for me, I feel in death, that's when you see what somebody has left on earth. You know, people will say, Sista D has always been there. Immediately I die, maybe that's when you see the impact that I've made. But like here in the morning, you know, we were showing the picture there that Michael did, you know, of Kaunda. You know, he was still alive, and we just thought he needs to be on that wall of legendaries, and there he is. So for me, sometimes we cannot blame people to say they don't appreciate people. They do appreciate, because, you know, what we are talking about is something that we realized when we lived with him. you know. So it's something debatable. It's something debatable. But we've always seen that people who've made an impact, even their funerals will tell. You know, when they die, it will tell, it will show what legacy they've left behind. Yeah.
As we conclude, what is your message to the to the nation and the Kaunda family as we mourn?
I think let's mourn Kaunda with dignity. Let's mourn him with tears of joy, because I think he showed us that it's possible to love your country. It's possible to own your country. It's possible to create your own wealth in your own country. So for me, let's mourn Kaunda as this hero, as this God that we once experienced our lives with, and we thank God for having given him to us as Zambians. Look at the liberation struggle without the Kaundas and the other strong men and women who stood to make sure that everybody was independent. I think that's a legacy that needs to be continued. And for me, I still urge people, let's revise humanism. You know, it doesn't need a day for us to celebrate Kaunda. So Kaunda needs to be celebrated throughout our lives.
That's all we had for you from Candid Talk. See you on the next edition. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for coming on the show.
Yeah.